Well, good evening. It's wonderful to be on the air again. I've been touring the province for the last, seemed like 6 weeks or so. Met a lot of wonderful people, had a lot of wonderful questions. And again, probably the biggest question people are asking about, they don't understand the process of this leadership race. Last Friday on the 4th of June, the Leadership Selection Committee put out an announcement saying that I was the only candidate that registered and met all the requirements. And so I've been vetted and authorized to be a legal candidate in the Wild Rose Independence Party of Alberta's leadership race. I'm excited to be in that race, even though it's a one-man race at this point, but we're racing against the clock, and whether you're racing for the mile or for the distance or for to climb the mountain, our race is for the March 2023 election, where we desperately need to claim back our province. We're in a chokehold. Ottawa wants to see Alberta as a have-not province. Our premier seems to totally misunderstand Albertans, the type of people we are, the entrepreneurship that we have, the desire to go out to earn and work and make a living, to raise our families free from government intervention. And we just find ourselves, those freedom fighters and Alberta patriots, in a desperate way here, basically in a chokehold, and we've got to break loose and save our province. But it's exciting for me. So I want to explain a few things, because some people are say, well, how can there be a race with only one person? Well, like I say, whether you're racing to the top of the mountain and you're the only one there, or to try and do the 4-minute mile, you still have to accomplish that race. And I have for many years, and again, back in 2004 when I ran for the first time, I've always felt that at the bottom of the voters list, I want none of the above. Sometimes none of them are worth supporting, but yet that's all we have for a choice. And I agree with the Leadership Selection Committee. I agree with our policies and our bylaws, in that there's an up-down vote or a 50% plus one vote, even for people that are running to be on our local constituency association boards or wherever we might be running for office. Because sometimes the people aren't happy with what's being presented to them, and I think that we should have that choice of none of the above. And that's what the members of the Wild Rose Independence Party of Alberta are going to have this July 12th and 13th, that they can vote and support me as their leader, or they can vote and say, you know what, we're wanting someone else to come forward. I'm excited to be in that race. I'm looking forward to receiving votes of confidence from our members, and where we can go from there to find other candidates to be nominated and run our 87 constituency associations throughout this province. I'm sure many of you saw the polls that came out last week in the Western Standard. We actually have one riding in Brooks Medicine Hat, where if the election was called that day, that we could well win that seat. And there's 3 other seats where we're up above 30%, and in a 3-way race, we could be contesting there. So it's very exciting to think, after only a few months, I guess we're actually getting close to the 1-year mark on June 30th, the first anniversary of our newly formed party, that it's never been heard of in my lifetime, where someone is showing so good in the polls. So this is exciting. I really think that it's important that we as Wild Rosers be able to get out and to meet and to talk to our friends and our neighbors. And I'll look forward to speeding up the campaign now. It's been very tough the last 6 weeks, where basically it was difficult to meet individuals and to have house meetings and town halls. There's been a few people that wanted to sponsor some, and I've been excited to been to those. Spoke at a few rallies. Very disappointed at the court order that shut down the Fire Kenny Stampede that was rodeo that was supposed to be at Bowden this last weekend. That was disappointing, but we've got some real Alberta heroes out there with pastors that have been put in jail, Stevens and Coates, and we've got our restaurateur Chris Scott, who also has been put in jail, and Ty Northcott with the rodeo was in that situation, that they were wanting to arrest and put him in jail if they held the rodeo. And so we're continuing to press forward, and I'm sure all of you were as tickled as I was to see the hypocrisy of our premier and his elite cabinet ministers meeting in the Sky Palace and having a whiskey or a wine or who knows what else they might have been having in their bottles. But it is quite incredible to me how disconnected the leadership of this province is from the actual people who are trying to raise their family, make a living, and to pay their taxes. We can't keep having a government that somehow thinks that they're, I don't know, so wise that they can pick which businesses are essential and which ones aren't. Through the winter, I remember some of the Walmart stores out east, they corridored off the areas that you couldn't go to shop. You could only go when it was only safe in the food department. And yet if you lost your pair of shoes or your boots and you needed a new pair, I think that was pretty essential. But like I say, government has no concept of reality. They sit in their boardrooms and they drink their whiskey, they have their wine, and they come up with ridiculous memorandums on how we should be conducting our lives or running our business. And when someone says, how do you explain that? I says, quite simply, if you're going to meet in the church, you're only allowed 15 people. If there's a dead person amongst you, you're only allowed 10 live ones. But if you're going outside to bury them, you can only go 5 can only go out, half can go. And bottom line is that there is no common sense. They just come up with, I don't know, numerical answers, and they haven't even looked at the full equation. So it's been disappointing. But enough about that. Let's get back to the leadership race. I'm looking forward to continuing my tour across the province. It's exciting that now that I'm an authorized candidate, I have access for the first time to the membership again. And I sent out an email at 6 o'clock tonight. If you didn't get that email, please go and look in your spam or in your promotions box, and let's get connected. It's very difficult in this time of censorship on what and how we can communicate and what we can talk about. I've been cut off a couple of times from YouTube, and so I'm trying to keep the channels open so we won't talk on some of those subjects that YouTube is so sensitive about, that is so critical to the lives of Albertans, but yet it's a censored subject when it comes to treating COVID and what we can do. And again, the problems that masks are causing for children and for workers. But I'm just excited that we just get wind in our sail every day from this premier and from Rachel Notley and the NDP on what they want to do and their vision for Alberta. Wild Roser's vision is very different. We want a prosperous and free province. We don't want a big government that's giving out handouts and acting like somehow our children and our grandchildren won't have to pay for it. The debt has doubled almost in many areas in the country. Is it $500 billion a deficit this year, 25 billion here in the province, and we have nothing to show for it. What we need is good government. We need a government that understands the importance of balancing the books and getting value on the tax dollars that are being spent. There's been nothing to increase the capacity of our healthcare system. It is interesting if you've watched Kristi Noem from South Dakota, and way back in January, 18 months ago, she talked about beefing up their hospitalization and making sure that they had the capacity to meet those sick people as they were coming in, so that we wouldn't have to shut down our system to so-called protect our healthcare system. But anyways, I just want to summarize again the importance of the leadership election on July 12th and 13th, and important that you engage. The party's going to have 3 town halls, one for Northern, Central, and Southern Alberta, where the members can sign in, but I'm going to start having live podcasts again. And tonight, basically, it's a Q&A so that I can answer the questions, because there's been a lot out there and our communications have been disrupted and it's been difficult. But like I say, I sent out an email this evening through the party. If it didn't come into your inbox, or people who are members and it's not getting there, please go to your trash or your promotions box and click on it and bring it back out there. But David, do we have some questions coming in from the people? I really tonight wanted to just have the Q&A and to let people know that there's still going to be a vote. I need to get 50% plus one in order to be your elected leader and to represent you here in Alberta. The condos, what is the earliest date an election could occur? Are some MLAs willing to run under WIPA? Well, there's no MLAs currently in the House that I am aware of, that I've talked to, that are willing to cross over and join us at this point. There's certainly several that are looking. Because of what happened to the MLAs that crossed over to join the government back in 2012, 13, when was that? With Daniel Smith crossing the floor. Many MLAs say, oh, you can't be a floor crosser. And there's a total, I want to say that the system's upside down. It's one thing to say that I cannot go along and agree with what the government is doing and step outside, versus crossing from opposition to join the government to say, oh, we're just excited and we're on the same team now and we're going forward. I've said many times, and I'll say it again tonight, we need MLAs that are accountable to their constituencies through a credible recall law, not accountable to the captain of the ship, this rat-infested ship that says where and how people are going to work and represent their areas. MLAs should not be accountable to the Premier. They should be accountable to their constituency and the people there through recall. And so we'll keep working. There's an open dialogue with many of them. And again, we'll see where it goes. But at this point, I think there's a better chance of one or two of them stepping down and having a by-election than one joining us. But we'll wait and see. And I appreciate the question, and we'll continue with that open dialogue. From Darcy, what is your stance on people with COVID who live in other provinces being brought into our province for treatment? Well, first of all, I wasn't aware of that, but I know with the Canada Health Act, if you're needing treatment, and let's say you live in Fernie, BC, and the capacity there is full, I think that our current healthcare agreement, that people should be brought in and treated. But what I don't agree with is the way Alberta healthcare has been looking after COVID. And I heard one extreme situation where a heart patient had an individual with COVID brought into their room in order to treat them. And this just goes against good healthcare practices and the need for isolation. They should have been putting up tents if they were needed, if we had a shortage, or using different wings that are being isolated for COVID. And it just seems like the government's desire has been to see problems exist so they can continue scaring people. But we want people that are needing help to get it. And if they need to cross the border, I don't see a problem with that. But what they need to do is to set up isolation units where there isn't the contamination from sick people coming into the hospital, because the damage that's happening and the loss of quality of life and life because failures of being diagnosed, being treated, receiving the operations that we need, I believe are outnumbering the deaths of COVID. But again, the government won't be open and honest with the deaths and what people are actually dying of. And I know of several cases where they're trying to link deaths to COVID so they can continue the fear mongering, which is very upsetting. And there's been some excellent work being putting pressure on the chief medical officer to try and correct those records that are saying that these are COVID deaths when these are people with other problems that died that had COVID. But anyways, we need to treat them all, and we need to increase the capacity of our system so that we can actually treat people during flu season and not shut them down in the future. But appreciate that question. What is my stance on work camps in remote areas like Fort McMurray? Well, Riley, I'm not really sure what you mean by that. There's lots of people that like to travel and work, and whether it's 7 days on, 7 days off, or 14 on and 5 off, or whether you're referring to the possibility of a COVID infection being transmitted. You know, COVID is, there's two types of pneumonia. You've got bacterial pneumonia and you've got viral pneumonia. And viral pneumonia has been our problem for decades with seniors and elderly people and even young, because we don't have good treatment for viral pneumonia and the body has to fight it off. But to have changed our complete outlook in life and how we can move and talk and work because of COVID, I think that we've actually weakened our immune system and people's ability to carry on a social life like we have in the past. There's lots of evidence showing that, the masking and all of the isolation has not stopped the spread of COVID. Instead, it's just delayed it and caused more problems. But like I said, I'm not really sure, Riley, what you mean by the work camps, but I believe that, again, if we go back to common sense, and if somebody's sick, that's when you need to isolate them, and we need to be more upfront when we're feeling sick, sore throat, or whatever else, and realize the importance of that and isolate ourselves and to stay home. But anyways, I hope that answered it, or you can maybe write in and expand on that question there, Riley. But do we have more questions, David? It's thanks, Beverly. It's actually 50% of the people who actually vote. Much like any election, it's not the total number of people that are registered and able to vote, but it's those who come out to vote. And when it comes to school board, often less than 20% turnout. When it's a really contentious issue, maybe we'll get 75% turnout. But I sure hope that we get a great turnout, that at least 50% of our members will participate, and that I'll be able to get that 50% plus one support from the members. And that will give us the credibility to go forward with an actually elected leader. But thanks, Beverly, for the question. Well, not Jason. How quickly can we separate? There's about 6 steps that we really need to do and to get ready. And I'm going to say, when a partnership or a marriage is breaking down, one of the first things that you need to do, especially when it's because of finances and one of the individuals is out of control, maybe a gambling problem, a drug problem, maybe a partying person who likes to throw lavish parties, whatever it is, if there's a problem with finances, you need to separate the bank account. Ottawa seems to print money. I don't know why they even care if they get our money, but the top 2 things that we need to do upon forming government is, 1, create the Alberta Revenue Agency and start collecting all of the taxes here in Alberta by Albertans for Albertans, and not necessarily for federal programs. So we'll scrutinize the federal programs that we think are important, perhaps the military, border security, intelligence, those type of things, and want to put in our share by what our representation is, taxation by representation. We need our own police force. And the real question is are they going to allow us to take the proper steps and put things in order and get our pension plan, our employment insurance set up, have our own environmental act that we'll be conducting our own assessment and what to do with the environment. And again, so important to have our own immigration policies here. And I would say how quick it will happen will depend on whether Ottawa is amiable or whether there's some ignorance on their part on how they want to behave and treat us. But I see that within 2 years of forming government, that would be the longest date that we would look to having a referendum. And if Ottawa is causing us grief, then we could have it right away if that's what's necessary, because of the difficulty of taking the steps to put those things in order, like I say, like our revenue agency, our police, our pension plan, our employment insurance. But the main thing is as soon as we're elected, we can start to protect Albertans immediately at that point and not have to wait any more time. We'll take immediate action the day after forming government to start protecting Alberta's interest here inside Canada, until we can have that referendum where Albertans can say that, we've had enough of their oversight, we've had enough of their policies, we've had enough of their spending, and we've certainly had enough of their globalism that they seem to want to promote and to destroy the economics of our country. In 1905, it was proposed for Alberta and Saskatchewan to be one province. In the referendum on is a referendum on the merger with Saskatchewan more realistic in the short term than one on independence? Well, Sean, that's a great question. If you actually add up the numbers and you take Saskatchewan and Alberta and northern BC, even if we were one province, it wouldn't change the dynamics of the voting in Ottawa. We don't have the representation. When you look at Prince Edward Island and New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and the amount of votes and seats and senators that they have, we can't change the dynamics. There's just no way, however you look at it and divide it up when it comes to the democratic process, we will not have the numbers to stop this divisiveness that our Constitution allows, where tyranny of the majority, where they can vote to take away, whether it's just from Alberta or whether it's BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon, we're outnumbered. And whether we're outnumbered 90-10 or whether we're outnumbered, 70-30, the results are the same when it comes to the Easterners voting to shut down our industries, to tax us heavily, and to redistribute our money. And so for me, we need to be a sovereign, independent nation. We can't afford to be sending $50 billion a year down to Ottawa for what pitiful, programs that we receive in return. It's just not there. And we know that 20 billion of that money that we send is purely a membership fee. It's not even any services being provided for it, which is even more disturbing when you look at the economic situation that we're in. And so we need to be a sovereign nation. I would be thrilled and look forward to BC and Saskatchewan joining us. Many people are very concerned, say, oh, I'm a Canadian, we've got to be Canadians. Well, who says that the East are the ones who get to be called Canada? And I'll also say, have you ever heard of East and West Germany? I think there'd be a lot of pride in being able to say, I'm from Western Canada, the strong and the free. We actually believe in people having their personal freedoms and their personal responsibilities. We believe in people being able to look after their well-being and to be able to be the number one person to care about their safety. Those are the things that Westerners believe in. Albertans definitely do. And I think that we can, like I say, form a Western Union that will be strong and free. But we've got to lead here in Alberta and let other people realize that, wow, it is okay to leave the hen's nest and to be out on our own again, as our early Albertans were when they came here before 1905 and up until the dirty 30s and through the dirty 30s and into World War II. Only the strong came to Alberta because they didn't come here looking for government handouts or looking for the government to protect them. But anyways, it's about a numbers game, and just being Alberta, Saskatchewan, one province wouldn't change those numbers or the voting pattern. But appreciate the question. It's a good one. What do you think it is that makes Alberta distinct from Canada? Well, Alan, I would say it's the people. When you travel around the world, it's interesting that we have a beautiful world that we live in, and most places have resources, but boy, there's very few that have the people with the entrepreneurial positive spirit that Albertans do, that have the land, that have the water, that have the air, that have the resources. I mean, what we have is just phenomenal. And we often hear, the breadbasket of Europe or the breadbasket of Russia. Well, Alberta is more than just the breadbasket. We're the energy basket. We're the bread basket. And we're the people basket. I mean, there's Albertans that go all around the world that are top notch in their class, in their industry. We've got great universities. We've got well-trained people. People often complain we're not diversified enough. When you actually look at the numbers, we have a lot of diversification. It's just that our strength in oil and gas is phenomenal compared to our other areas. But we can and we will compete. We need to look at national security. There's no reason why we don't have a pharmaceutical facility here in the province. There's no reason why we don't have automobile manufacturing, especially when the East says that they don't want gas and diesel engines anymore. These are all things that we can and will invite industry to be here because of our regulations will be such, and our taxation will be very inviting for businesses to set up and to be here. And like I say, we'll be actually looking at our national security interest in all areas, whether it's healthcare, just engineering, all of those things. We will make sure that we have them here in Alberta, and we'll protect our freedoms because we won't be dependent on other areas. But appreciate the question. Anne, can you comment on how to keep corruption away? I take it. Well, there's two things that I believe that really reduce corruption. Number one is the freedom of information. There's no reason why the government books aren't open books, that you can look and see what they're spending on what programs and how much. It used to be the Blue Book, and maybe they still have it, but I don't know, where you could go online or you could go to the Blue Book that used to be, 4 or 5 inches thick, and you could look and see every check and every dollar that left from the government and where it went to. But you couldn't know what was provided. We need an open and transparent government. When there's bids going out, those bids need to be public. This idea that if there's 3 bids that's competitive and we don't need to make it public is corrupt in itself. And so number one is to open up the books and be transparent on all government enterprises and funding and spending. Number two is accountability. It just doesn't work if you can't, when you hire somebody, you need to be in the position where you can fire them. I don't think there'd be anything more important right now in order to get our freedom back than we could be out gathering signatures to recall MLAs rather than go to rallies and protest. And so number one for me that we will have is an accountability bill on recall. And again, even if we're unable to form government and we're a minority government or something else, Wild Rose MLAs will be signing a promise to Albertans that will be accountable through recall. We don't need legislation to be accountable. We will do that. And again, that recall for me is quite simple. Again, it's that 50% plus one of the total number of voters in the last election to fire somebody. If there were 20,000 voters, you'd need to collect 10,001 signatures within, I'd say, a minimum of 120 days. And that MLA would be fired. And we just need accountability. When there's no accountability and there's lots of dark bookkeeping, corruption flourishes. And that's what we see with the current government, not only here, but across Canada and the world, is that corruption is there because we can't get the information. We don't know what's really going on behind those closed doors. But excellent question, Anne, and appreciate the support that you've given to the party over the last months, and wish you and your family the best. Mark Gibson, I honestly see a split vote between yourself and Kenny at the next election. Is there any common ground to take out the NDP? Well, I appreciate your concern, Mark, and historically that's always been the concern. But boy, my number one thing is split the vote. Why would you waste the vote on Jason Kenney? We know who he is, we know what he's doing, and we know he's not accountable. Number two, we know that he and Rachel are federalists, and the ballot question for me next time, are you voting for Alberta and for us to take control of our future, or are you going to vote to let Ottawa continue to rule the roost and tell us what we can do and where we can do it and all of the things that we can't do? And so it's not about splitting the vote. It's don't waste your vote. And actually vote for someone that's going to be accountable. Why would you even vote for Rachel or Jason, who both have the opportunity to put in accountability through recall and they refuse to? At least with the Wild Rose, you place your vote, your confidence, your trust with us. You can fire us if you're not happy with us. And that's a huge difference. And so for that alone, I just believe that we can convince Albertans that, you know what, it's time to throw out the old and go with something new. Something that's actually trustworthy and accountable and going to be forthright on what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, and not always have backdoor traps that we're not aware of, and all these promises kept that are not promises kept. Promises made, promises kept. Are you kidding? You promised recall. You haven't even passed the bill, and then what the bill that they have is an insult to Albertans. And my bet is even if they do pass the bill, it won't receive royal assent until after the next election. And so there's lots of promises made, but there's been no accountability. Like I say, don't waste your vote. Vote for something you believe in. Vote for someone that you can actually recall and stop. This idea that the government needs to have a mandate in 4 years to do its hard work is called their dirty work. And very seldom is it in the benefit or the interest of Albertans, as we've seen in the last 6 years. It's been to the detriment of Albertans, and we've only had 1 day in 6 years where we could do something about it. And boy, I don't know about you, but I feel like I was bamboozled big time on what I was supporting and voted for. But anyways, that's a challenge going forward, to talk to Albertans, but it's not about splitting the vote. Let's not waste the vote. Let's vote for something that we believe in, and something that will be accountable to us. But excellent question, and we'll continue dealing with that. And again, well, how do you keep corruption out of the judiciary and the police force? Okay, well, it all starts with the monster at the top, which is government, which needs to be held accountable. But both for the judiciary and the police force, I believe in elected civilian oversight. I don't think bureaucrats should be controlling the police, and I don't think politicians should be. And again, these elected civilian oversight individuals will be subject to recall. And this is a way of an arm's length. And again, if the police aren't doing what we want, and let's even say handing out fines for not social distancing, or not wearing our mask, or for gathering at a place, we could recall those civilians and say, you know what? We don't want police that all they're concerned about is compliance to these ridiculous rules. We want our freedoms. And again, they could redirect the police. The judicial system is the same thing. I believe that we need elected judicial oversight. It's just been astounding to me how spineless the judges have been in upholding the Constitution, in that all of these freedoms that we've lost. Clause 1 in the Constitution says it needs to be demonstrably justified, not politically justified, not fear-mongering, scientific numbers to show where it's at. We've never even had baseline numbers to show us previous years on how many people died from influenza or the flu or whatever it is. And again, all of a sudden we've got these new numbers that are out there scaring us to death, when the fact of the matter is there's been a little over 2,000 people die last year in Alberta. On an average year, we have 24,000 to 26,000 people die. What about the other 22,000 to 24,000 people that have died? Those numbers aren't there, and the judges, for whatever reason, don't want any information. They don't want people like John Carpe and the Justice Center to be able to ask the hard questions and for the proof to come into our courts. And so we need a different way of controlling our judges, because the government who appointed them is obviously getting the underhand deal, and they're not upholding the Constitution, and there needs to be accountability. But appreciate that question, Anne. It's a good one and a very important one. Beverly, what would be the repercussions to Alberta? Alberta is plastics are deemed toxic. Wow, Beverly, if plastics were deemed toxic, the world would come to a halt. I often use this poor analogy, but this is like the grade 6 science class being put together through the noon hour as they work on a project on how they're going to make the world a better place. And they've gone on a tour to a chicken farm, and they just can't believe the stink from the chicken manure and all of the feathers and the dust. And they come back and they order McNuggets, and they sit around the table and say, we think the world would be a better place without chickens. And they have no idea where McNuggets come from. And people are just so disconnected from the realities of the petrochemical business and the benefits that it give in the medical system, in our daily lives, and in our shirts. How much is polyester and the new fabrics that are coming out? People are totally disconnected, and again, they can ban them other places, but here in Alberta, we're pro petrochemicals and the petrochemical industry, and we will see that industry grow and thrive here in a sovereign and free Alberta. Just had another entry here, but you realize how many of us use cellophane and wrap our food in our plastic containers. The two things that are the safest that we know is glass and plastics, and we use plastics all the time, plastic butcher boards now, and just you go through it with our knives, the handles, and plastics are just a true miracle in technology on how we can produce it and not actually have to cut down our trees. It's just people, like I say, are so disconnected, but thanks for that text. But yeah, plastics are not toxic, and that's why we use them so much in the medical system, in our cooking and everything else. But so again, it goes back to the idea that they've declared CO2 a poisonous or a greenhouse gas, when in fact CO2 is the essential component for plants to survive. And without CO2, actually this planet would come to a halting death. And so plastics, CO2, they're a great blessing to humanity. And again, with the increase in CO2 that's happened, food production has gone up 10 to 15%, which has been documented and well, it's been well documented. It's just a known fact. But anyways, excellent question. It's a matter of teaching our kids in school, again, the realities of life and death and everything in between, and the blessings that are ours, but where do they all come from? Because most people are clueless now on where our food comes from, let alone our clothing or all of the things and the gadgets that we use. They don't understand where it comes from, and we need to reconnect with reality. Ken, BC has had recall legislation for 20 years. Doesn't seem to be effective. How can we make ours effective? Well, you know, like freedom, when you haven't had it before, you don't know how to exercise it. And I wish I could say, Ken, right now at the top of my head, what the recall legislation in BC is, but I think the threshold is too high. And again, people aren't well aware of it, and you get the odd individual. For example, when Premier Campbell went about and said that he promised that he wasn't going to blend the GST and the HST, and that they're going to keep them separate, and then he formed government and they did a cost benefit analysis and says, oh my goodness, this is costing us an extra $300 million. We're going to blend the two. I can't remember who it was that led the recall on that, but bottom line, they went out, started the recall legislation. He stepped down, and that was kind of the demise of good government in BC from that moment going forward. But recall does work. It's the importance of the threshold, just kind of like the PCR tests and stuff. If the threshold is too high, we have false positives. If it's too low, we don't have positives. And so we need to have a happy medium. I think 50% plus one of the total number of voters in the last election is a very good starting position. If we find that we've had many people recalled, but yet they were re-elected, maybe we'd have to raise it a little bit higher. But I like I say, with the research that I've done, 50% plus one of the total number of last time voters is a very credible number. It's a time frame that you need. You can't do it in 60 days. To me, like I say, you need at least 4 months, and maybe we need to open that up more. But I think 4 months is a good time period. And again, people need to realize the benefit of it and utilize it more often. From Stacy, where do you stand on support for people and families of persons with disabilities such as FCCD and ACE? You know, one of the most important things that we as individuals do is I believe we are our brother's keepers, and we need to ensure that we help individuals that need help. Ever since I've been campaigning way back in 2004, when I've talked to people about social programs and social assistance, I think one of the worst things that we do to people on social assistance and stuff is we have what we call the clawback clause. The little amount that we give to people with AISH is not a quality of life. Many of those individuals could go out and work maybe 10 hours a week or maybe 20. And I absolutely think that we not only need to support those people with disabilities, but we need to allow them to earn some extra money and no clawbacks. And I think that if they could go out and earn, up to $2,000 a month more, because maybe 3 or 4 months out of the year, they feel good enough to work, those should be benefits that actually they, are motivated to get out and to benefit from being able to work and to increase their living income. But no, we need to ensure that we look after those who struggle and have difficulties. And I don't think we're doing a very good job now. And there's a lot of areas where we can do better. Once again, it seems like the frontline workers are the last ones to get it. When you look at world aid that goes around the world, it seems like millions and millions of dollars are wasted and don't ever get to the front line. And I think with AISH, we need to do a lot of streamlining and other disabilities to make sure the money's actually going to those individuals who need it and not half of it being consumed before we get to those individuals. But excellent question, and I hope that answered it for you. And if not, we can communicate some more. And if you have some ideas, I'd love to hear them. What is your goal going forward in Alberta for infrastructure and finishing our products here instead of sending it out? Well, excellent question, Tammy. I think the most important thing that we can do here in Alberta is to be vertically integrated. And it's been a 100-year process to try and get our industries vertically integrated. We've always been wanting to sell the raw product, whether it's our grain, whether it's our wood, whether it's our fuel, or bitumen. There's no reason why we're not vertically integrated and processing and giving high quality products out here. Infrastructure. I have been an advocate for 20 years, it seems like, that what we need is a prioritized public infrastructure list. There's no reason why we shouldn't have the top 100 infrastructures that we need, whether that's Highway 20 needs fixing because it's the frost heaves and stuff, or whether a school that needs fixing, or a hospital, or the fact that we need a new hospital. We need to have a prioritized public infrastructure list that shows the projects, and we need to be spending about the same amount of money each year. And literally it'll go out to industry. If we're going to spend $7 billion on infrastructure next year, we start at the top of the list, which is a school in Redwater, and we start going down with the bids. It'll be open and for Albertans to see. And when we get to the 7 billion mark, that's where we'll stop for the year. But this idea of political interference and building roads or putting up a hospital here or promising, a school over there in order to get votes to win an area needs to stop. And Albertans need to be able to see that prioritized list. And when you realize that, wow, a school in Redwater is ahead of my school in Red Deer, and you go and you look out the situation and, oh, makes sense. I see why they're higher up on the list. But just needs, again, to go back, as Anne was questioning, how do we get rid of the corruption in our infrastructure? It's by having a public prioritized infrastructure list and then having open competitive bidding, and not these ridiculous cost plus projects where the people come in and say, oh, we'll do it at a great deal. You just give us cost plus 10. And my goodness, the cost goes up double. You look at the South Hospital and what we spent on that is unbelievable. You look at Grand Prairie and up there and other projects. These cost plus projects are an absolute disaster, and they need to end. But anyways, hope that answered your question. Another excellent question, because infrastructure and the lack of it and the prioritization that's happened is really hurting Alberta. And with the few dollars that we have right now, we've got to focus them on the top priority areas and get rid of the political maneuvering that goes on. I've just always been appalled when you've seen the interference by cabinet in changing the infrastructure needs throughout the province and how they decide where and who to spend the money on. But excellent question. Larry, my question, is it too early to ask what we can expect to see independent Alberta? Example, how would retirees see their pensions continue? Well, excellent question. And I'm just looking at the time. I promised David tonight we're going to start making these short and sweet. Canada Pension Plan, it is a flawed system. When it first started, there were 6 or 7 workers per ever retiree. They didn't look at the actuaries to realize that the numbers and where we're going to end up. They didn't account for the life expectancy to go from 67 to 82. And there's been a lot of miscalculations and mismanagement. And right now, one of my big concerns with the Canada Pension Plan is the fact that I don't know what percentage, 25%, 30% is being invested in China, which is a real threat to us and our economy. Bottom line, though, is Albertans pay about $7.5 billion into the Canada Pension Plan, and our seniors only receive about $5 billion back. So we're sending in about $2.5 billion a year to the Canada Pension Plan. Some people say up to $3 billion extra, but the bottom line is that we can enhance the benefit for our seniors here and reduce the premiums for our workers here. This is a win-win to get the Alberta Pension Plan, and it is just saddening to see where Quebec is with their pension plan. Had we not started the Alberta Pension Plan way back then, ours, I think you'd be astounded, but it would be better than Quebec's because of our workforce and the people and what they put into that. But no, it's a huge win for Albertans to have our own pension plan. And all of the naysayers, they're not looking at the whole picture. They look at one little aspect and say, oh, it's going to cost this much to do that, or who's going to handle this? Well, we're paying for that now. But when you do a complete cost benefit analysis, bottom line is that we can reduce our premiums and increase our benefits and continue to move forward and actually have a positive fund that has the money there. But excellent question, and something that we need to share with seniors to give them that confidence that an independent Alberta will be to their benefit as well. They have nothing to lose and a lot to gain. David, should we only take 2 or 3 more questions and we'll come back again? I'm realizing we're taking you past your time tonight. Bruce, if Wild Rose forms a government, would Bill 66 be scrapped? Oh, there's so many numbers in front of me. Can anybody help me out on what Bill 66 is about? Is that the new censorship one, or I'm drawing a blank here? Bill, or Bruce, can you please expand that one for me? But bottom line is most all of the federal bills will be scrapped. We'll be a sovereign nation, and most of these bills make no sense. They're divisive bills to hurt one area at the benefit of another, or to oppress the people at the benefit of the people in power. And we absolutely need to have legislation that's protecting Albertans, protecting their families, protecting the future, and anything that's taken away from those protections needs to be scrapped. But apologize, Bruce, that don't have the answer to that one for sure for Bill 66. But David, can we take 2 more questions here, and then we'll call it a night and let you get on with your other meeting you're supposed to be in. Oh, it says modernizing public health laws. We're going to turn the healthcare system upside down and actually start to protect the patients and to have proper access. Our global funding to healthcare has been a disaster. Our centralizing healthcare has been a disaster. And what we need is each hospital to have a hospital administrator. We need that board to decide what services they can provide, but most important is that they'll be paid for the services that they actually provide for the people. Right now, the system is such that because they receive their global funding, or they look at the number of beds, they look at the services that are being provided, and then say they're given a budget of $2 billion, every patient that comes in to be treated, it costs them now because they have to pay to do that treatment. And so there's no incentive to actually be efficient. There's no incentive to get people treated and through, because they get their money before they provide the service. And we need the service to be paid upon completion, and we need innovative people that are looking at ways to do it quicker and better. We saw that with the hip and knee, which again was just disgusting what this government did for the rule of law and those investors that had invested in a hip and knee surgery in Calgary. That where we would be today had they let that hospital, that facility go forward. We have way too many individuals in Alberta that are still waiting for hip and knee surgeries, and we can and we will do much better. And healthcare and education are two areas where I'm excited that we can see the frontline service increase, and take a hard look at the management and the misconceptions that we have at that level. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This is going to be an exciting leadership race. Looking forward to more questions and ideas and innovations that we as Albertans have. The answers are out there. We just need a leader, which you can count on me. I ask that you go to my website, paulhinman.com, invest in this leadership race, because that'll be the best political donation and money that you've ever spent, and you won't be disappointed with the outcome here. We will save our province, and we'll have something that we're proud to hand to our children and grandchildren, instead of the system right now where our healthcare is lacking, our education is just sad to see its deficiency, and that they're born into servitude with the debt that we currently have, and we need to pay that off, and we will pay that off. But thanks for tuning in. Looking forward to the next one. And again, go to my website, paulhinman.com. I'm wanting to tour Alberta, to come to your area. Send your emails to paul@paulhinman.com. Let's communicate. This is exciting. We actually have a pathway to be strong and free. But take care and God bless, and we'll see you soon.